So I've been aware of Bitcoin for approximately a decade, but I only got stuck into it this week, did some reading on it, and I emerge unimpressed by Bitcoin. So perhaps the easiest summary that makes common sense to me is by a liberal blogger named Kevin Drum, how baseball cards explain what a Bitcoin really is. So what is money tends to have these attributes. It's hard to counterfeit. So Bitcoin meets that need. It is stable in value. That's not Bitcoin. Bitcoin is rocketing up and down in value. It is light and easy to carry. Bitcoin meets that. It is widely accepted. Bitcoin does not meet that, and it is 100% liquid. So Bitcoin currently gets close to that. So is Bitcoin money? No, not really. But it is hard to counterfeit, and it is easy to carry around. So what else shares these attributes of being hard to counterfeit and easy to carry around? So rare stamps and coins and tulips, baseball cards. So Bitcoin really has few of the attributes of money, but all of the attributes of a collectible. So think of it as like a 1952 Mickey Mantle card that's worth more than a 1951 Willie Mays. Both cards are more valuable than, say, a Tom Egan rookie card, which is sort of the Dogecoins of baseball cards. So Bitcoin fans like to insist that it's money, but that's a serious category mistake. It's a genre error. So to criticize Ben Shapiro for being a shallow thinker, you're making a genre error, because he's just a talk show host who just pumps out the most conservative opinions possible, even if he knows absolutely nothing about what he's talking about. But that's the genre that he works in, talk show host. He doesn't write thoughtful books. He just knocks off shallow books. So Bitcoin's supposedly strongest selling point, absolute privacy, is mostly a lie, because almost all Bitcoin is traded through central exchanges that are regulated by national governments. You don't have to use a central exchange if you have the technical chops to trade it yourself, but that's a pain, and it makes Bitcoin even less money-like than it already was. So don't think of Bitcoin as money. Think of it as like Beanie Babies or Pez dispensers or other collectibles. And after you make this mental adjustment, you're no longer confused about Bitcoin. It's a collectible. It's not a currency. It's a collectible that's got a lot of hype. Maybe it will stay valuable the way that rare stamps and coins have stayed valuable, or maybe like Beanie Babies, it won't. But whatever turns out to be the case, it means nothing profound about the future of money. Bitcoin is just another collectible that will go up and down at the whims of its fans. I thought that was an excellent little summary there on Bitcoin. Here is a debate between Anthony Popliano and Mike Green on
both
Bitcoin.
For coming and having this conversation on Real Vision Crypto. Anthony, of course, you've been on Real Vision multiple times, and you've hosted Raoul on your podcast. Mike, you host Mike Green in Conversation series right here on Real Vision. This debate started on Twitter. We all love Twitter. It's a great place to blast out little squibs, but not always the best place to have a long-form conversation. You know, when I think about this, this is more than a debate between two individuals. This is two worldviews colliding, and that broader collision is just beginning to be felt around the world. I couldn't think of two better people to represent those worldviews here than you. Pomp, you're at the very vanguard of the digital assets investment movement at Morgan Creek Digital. Mike, what you do over at Logica Capital is some of the most sophisticated analysis of traditional capital markets anywhere, and we're very glad to have both of you here on Real Vision for this conversation today. Mike, since you started to make the case that kicked off this debate, why don't you go first and explain the basic framework? What is your view of Bitcoin and why?
Well, just first as background, right? The reason that I became more actively involved in the Bitcoin debate was kicked off by actually a Real Vision event, a Blacklist event in Dallas, Texas in October of 2020. I was fortunate to be there and have the opportunity to engage with a number of family offices that were almost uniformly making the observation that they were in the process of replacing gold in their portfolios or reallocating away from gold into Bitcoin. And interestingly, they all used the same terminology, that it was the superior asset. As I began to evaluate that condition and to think about that dynamic, it was important for me to really dig in a professional sense. And as I've indicated elsewhere, I've participated in Bitcoin. I've had involvement with Bitcoin on a personal basis historically. I ultimately have chosen not to do that anymore. And that was a personal choice. As I dug into it on a professional basis, it required a much deeper dive. Once I began to dig into it and to evaluate this claim that Bitcoin was a superior asset, it became very clear to me that that was really totally untrue, that it was an inferior asset relative to gold.
So I played around with Bitcoin. Number one, I wanted to make it easier. If people wanted to give me money in the form of Bitcoin, I wanted to learn a little bit about it. And I bought some Bitcoin. I held on to it till I made about a 15% profit. than I sold all out of Bitcoin about 2 months ago.
Certainly in terms of the dynamics of why a central bank would choose to hold it. And secondly, it was recognizable as an inferior asset once you actually began to evaluate the claims that are made within the community. I think one of the things that sets my work apart in traditional asset markets is the recognition that a rising price does not tell you something is working, that something is going to be successful, right? You and I have been recorded where I've used the terminology driving uphill with no brakes. I would suggest the same thing applies to Bitcoin, where the price has clearly risen, and that gives people comfort in the story. But the reality is that Bitcoin is a superior asset for one reason and one reason only. It facilitates those who want to work against the existing system, either to generate dollars in the case of China, Russia, Iran, or other bad actors on the global stage that are trying to avoid sanctions, or for criminal purposes. And as I dug further into the data that is presented within the industry, it became very clear that the data that is being presented is disingenuous. So for example, the industry will simultaneously say 95% of the data is fake, 95% of the transactions are fake, and then use those same 95% of the transactions in disputing the claim that crypto is primarily used for crime. If you look at reports like the report from Elliptical that came out in 2020 regarding the utilization of crypto for crime purposes, they suggest that it's around 2%. And the disingenuous claim is made over and over again that the US dollar is more widely used for crime, or the euro is more widely used for crime. Of course, that's true given the relative acceptance of them, but as a proportion of transactions within Bitcoin, we either have to decide that the 95% of the transactions that are referred to as being fake and therefore shouldn't be considered should be ignored when we're thinking about the dynamics of the utilization for crime purposes. And if we adjust for that, what we discover is nearly 40% of crypto transactions are actually used for crime.
So to just get one dramatic perspective on cyber currencies, there's a terrific series on Netflix called Startup. It runs 3 seasons. It was originally on Crackle, but it's all about the world of cyber currencies, about people starting up a cyber currency business and then starting up their own dark web. And set in Miami. It's great fun. And it's a dramatic way of getting a feel for the cyber currency world.
The vast majority of the mining activity is occurring in regions like China, Russia, and Iran. And if we incorporate the participation of mining pools, they control in excess of 90% of the hash rate. This is not a decentralized system. It has become an increasingly centralized system focused on one thing and one thing only, attracting US dollars and providing that to those who are utilizing resources in regions like China, Russia, and Iran to capture dollars.
Pomp, I imagine you have a different view.
Yeah, I mean, look, we can get into all the specifics of kind of Mike's opening statements. What I would just say is, I think that Mike's worldview, I'm not sure what changed, I'm sure we'll get into it, but is misinformed. I believe that his position on the asset and on kind of the growth and the market adoption is misinformed. And I think that the argument that he is making, as I'll show, kind of historical context, is absurd. And what we are actually talking about is if Mike's worldview ends up prevailing, we essentially are going to cut the United States off from the future global growth. And I think that it is not only a misinformed worldview, but frankly, it's a very dangerous worldview. And I'm actually glad that most of the politicians who talk about this topic don't see the world the way that he sees the world, because I think that, again, it's very dangerous. And it could be the single greatest kind of inhibitant to the United States continuing to have the position of power and leadership that it has on a global stage. And if Mike's worldview was to prevail, he would actually be handing victory to many of America's adversaries. And so, excited to get into it. I really respect Mike and kind of a lot of his views and prior work that he's done. But I just think in this one sector of financial markets, he's misinformed and his worldview is inaccurate.
Okay, so some Orthodox Jews are modifying their behavior in Los Angeles after a series of attacks on Orthodox Jews because Israel is at war with Hamas in the Middle East. Israel's a Jewish state. And
well, after 11 days of fighting like that, there's a ceasefire between Israel and terrorist organization Hamas. President Biden is set to react to the news at the White House. Well, that situation has cooled down for now. The conflict over the fighting in the Middle East is heating up in America. New video shows a shocking attack on Jewish diners by what witnesses say is a pro-Palestinian mob. So Dana, we've been watching this play out in the Middle East, 4,000 rockets fired by Hamas at Israeli civilian targets over the last 11 days, but it's boiled over into the States, and we've seen Jews hunted down in the streets by what people are saying are pro-Palestinian protesters. I would call them more than that, but that's what we're seeing on the videos.
Right, so and being investigated as a potential hate crime. Also, there are some, because of social media or new technology, there are ways that these groups can organize and say, meet up, this is where we're going to be, and there should possibly that will lead police to be able to, one, either protect people that are out and about, or at least track down perpetrators of this. Another piece of this is Joe Biden gets ready to make a statement in about 25 minutes. First of all, I don't understand how Hamas has conditions for a ceasefire, right? And understand that the protection of life is very
So, would there be more or less attention paid to these attacks on Jews if they were carried out by the alt-right? Not sure.
very important, but we also have to be very clear-eyed about the root cause of who supports Hamas and what Hamas has done, even to the people of Gaza, putting these missile targets right there in the middle of hospitals and schools. And the propaganda that the Hamas is able to get out of this is that they are strong, and that they are in the position of being the big guy, the one that can save everybody, when actually they're putting so many people in danger. Last thing on this, that there's just not enough attention, I don't believe, Katie, on the fact that the Democrats in Congress, some Democrats in Congress, are trying to put a halt to a recently approved weapons sale from the United States to Israel. They're kind of pro forma. These things are almost always put forward and agreed to. All of a sudden, that is in jeopardy. And it's like those Democrats that are calling for that are watching right there on their screen. They can see that Israel has utilized that money well. You can see that the Iron Dome is protecting innocent people. And the Democrats somehow think that there should be less of that. I think we should pay a little bit more attention to that before Joe Biden gets to the podium in about 25 minutes.
Yeah, Juan, what about that? We've seen the Squad saying that they don't want to replenish the Iron Dome, but you can argue that the Iron Dome actually saves the lives of people.
Okay, I want to get back to the topic of cyber currencies, and just did a deep dive into this week. Michael Hiltzik has a column in the Los Angeles Times. Coinbase had a great public stock offering that does not make Bitcoin legit. So as an investment, Bitcoin has been wildly oversold by its fan base. Well, it's incredibly volatile, right? So if you stay in the market for, say, the last 9 years, then you made a really good profit. But say from December 18, 2017 to February 10, 2018, Bitcoin's value fell by 55%. So much stronger variation in the Bitcoin and cyber currency markets than even the stock market. But Bitcoin fans don't usually pitch the cryptocurrency primarily as an investment. They pitch it as a currency, but a currency should be hard to counterfeit, stable in value, easy to carry, widely accepted, 100% liquid. Bitcoin fails 3 of those tests. It's not stable in value, it is not widely accepted, and it's not 100% liquid. So the key test that Bitcoin must pass is what we might call the Kenya storefront test. So this derived from Michael's sojourn as a foreign correspondent in Nairobi in the 1980s, when the official exchange rate was about 8 Kenyan shillings to the dollar. But experienced foreign residents wouldn't think of buying shillings at the official rate. They wanted the black market rate, which was closer to 16 shillings to the buck. So expatriates wishing to obtain the better rate would wander into a grocery store owned by an Indian merchant, usually not a native African merchant, write him a check in dollars on a U.S. bank in return for black market shillings. He then mailed the check to a relative in the United States for deposit there, and thereby spirit dollars out of Kenya in contravention of the country's strict foreign exchange regulations. The system served everybody except the government. So Bitcoin might serve those merchants down to the ground. They could convert shillings or dollars to Bitcoins and then convert them to dollars remotely. Now, these black market conversions in Kenya were illegal. So just another reminder that big category of users of Bitcoin are criminals. Bitcoin propagandists assert the qualities that make Bitcoin so useful for underground transactions are its virtues. The great thing about Bitcoin, they say, is that it operates outside national central banking systems. Now, this is supposed to be a great thing. Many traditional systems like banks, credit unions, PayPal take control of your funds and leave you subject to their terms of service, says the personal finance site do. So if you violate those terms, they can suspend your account. But how many people have ever had their account suspended by a bank or a credit card or even PayPal? Is exceedingly rare. So many of the oft-told advantages of Bitcoin, such as supposedly rock-solid security, anonymity, convenience, they're either detrimental to the user or they don't really exist at all. So who benefits from Bitcoin security? Not the average guy. These transactions take place without a regulated intermediary, so no one can rectify a Bitcoin transaction with a counterparty who turns out to be fraudulent. So plenty of people have challenged a credit card bill or a bank payment because they did not receive the goods or the services they've paid for. People have had their credit and debit cards stolen, and the thing that stood between you and the thieves, these intermediaries, banks and credit cards. With Bitcoin, forget it. So there are 2 keys to securing financial transactions: oversight and an audit trail. Money in your bank account goes astray, the bank's records will show what happened and correct the error. With Bitcoin, there's no oversight, no audit trail. So How is that supposed to be a plus? And the security in Bitcoin does not mean security from loss. So one customer's holdings in Bitcoin, known as Mt. Gox, went astray. At one point, these holdings were estimated at $1 trillion. So often Bitcoin accounts have been hacked by cyber thieves or lost when their owners misplace their access codes, which cannot be replicated. So there's nothing in the Bitcoin universe resembling the FDIC, which protects customers from losses as much as $250,000 or $500,000 if their financial institution fails. As for convenience, as Matt Levine of Bloomberg analyzes, everything I read about Bitcoin storage is utterly exhausting, because there's just so many different ways that people use to try to protect their Bitcoin holdings. So Bitcoin is not a mainstream asset. It's a collectible like baseball cards, a collectible that's gotten a lot of hype. It has no intrinsic value, doesn't even represent a theoretical claim on a national hoard of gold. The United States dollar is backed by the most powerful nation that the world has ever seen, the United States of America. So Bitcoin's worth depends on two factors: the desire of Bitcoin fans to keep buying and holding, and an artificially created scarcity. So Bitcoins are a pain to manage. And there's a lot of hype about Bitcoin, just as there's been hype about other things like Beanie Babies. Doesn't mean that there's real substance there.
Pump, I want to characterize what I heard from Mike is there are principally two arguments that he made against Bitcoin that were really core to the thesis. The others are sort of supporting those two pieces. The first is that Bitcoin is a conduit for criminality, and that the rate at which Bitcoin is used to facilitate criminal transactions is far higher than US dollars or euro, effectively higher than fiat. And the second is that Bitcoin is inherently dangerous in Mike's view because it has the potential from a geostrategic perspective, meaning that there are countries in the world who do not wish the United States well, that are either strategic rivals or strategic adversaries, and they're using Bitcoin fundamentally to build an advantage against the US dollar system, against sanctions regimes, and some of the other things that the United States has controlled since the end of the Cold War. What are your views specifically on those points?
Yeah, so let's first just start with what Bitcoin is, right? Bitcoin is simply a open, decentralized digital protocol, very similar to what the internet is. And so the perspective that Mike has of, as other countries leverage this open, digital, decentralized protocol for their gain, we therefore should, as the United States, ban ownership.
So I just had fun interaction with YouTube. They gave me a strike on my other channel for an excerpt that I uploaded from my May 14 show, where I talked about that study from Harvard University on mail-in voter fraud, anatomy of a disinformation campaign. They said that I violated their spam, deceptive practices, and scams policy, and gave me a strike and removed the content. So I appealed, and within 10 minutes, they reviewed my appeal and they confirmed that my content does not violate our community guidelines. So I've had this experience several times with YouTube. They've given me a strike, I've appealed, and I guess I've probably had about 40-50% success with my various appeals with YouTube. So YouTube is obviously not perfect. Most of these decisions are made by algorithm, and the quality of the people who are operating many of these decisions is often quite low. They're not making very much money. There's not much intelligence there. But that is how the world is. The world is filled with midwits and below average IQs. The world is never going to be perfectly fair. And so we have to make our decisions not based on absolute fairness, but also on the basis of what's likely to happen, right? Given that we're dealing with a lot of idiots, how then shall we live? So I think a lot of the COVID restrictions were extra strict because we have so many idiots. And so if we didn't wall off all these different activities, then idiots would find more and more excuses not to conduct themselves responsibly. So if we had a more coherent society where we had more social trust, more social cohesion, then we would not have had many of these more ridiculous lockdown policies, such as don't go to the beach, don't go to the playground, when being outside was the very healthiest thing possible. So yeah, I've had my ups and downs with YouTube. It's not absolutely horrific. It's just another human institution.
leadership, prevent usage, etc. If that worldview was to prevail, when the internet came around, we would essentially be living in prehistoric times. We would be North Korea, because that is what North Korea has done to their citizens. Is they have said, you are not allowed to use this open, digital, decentralized protocol called the internet. Instead, the United States, thankfully, was innovative. It was forward-thinking, and it believed in capitalism and democracy. And it said, if any country is going to benefit from an open, digital, decentralized protocol, we are going to make sure that we are the leader. We are going to use this to further our leadership position on a global scale. And so while Mike, I think, has this belief that other countries are benefiting from an open, digital, decentralized protocol, he's not wrong. But the reaction or the end result of that should not be, we therefore are going to opt out, because that will not stop these other countries from using that open, digital, decentralized protocol. You cannot shut this down. And so instead, what we should do is we should embrace it, and we should ensure that the United States stays the leader on a global scale. And so what we've seen in other countries is when their leadership has decided to ban the participation in that open, digital, decentralized protocol, adoption has actually gone up among the citizens. And I think that it's a very, very misleading argument to make around criminal activity to say that 40% of transactions are for criminal activity, right? The beauty of this is, while we can sit and we can guess what are the US dollar transactions, right? The difference is Mike cannot tell us how many dollars are in circulation. Mike cannot tell us and prove to us how much gold is in circulation. But I can.
So a lot of talk about more regulation of Bitcoin, and that's going to
A couple of
affect
China's new restrictions
Bitcoin
could call into
prices.
question Bitcoin's immediate and long-term futures. David Rubenstein, Carlyle Group co-founder, had some thoughts on that topic this morning.
I think it's here to stay. Cryptocurrency is not going away, just like gold is not going away. So yes, it had its ups and downs, and yesterday was not a good day for it. But that's true of anything that is relatively new. And I don't think you're going to see anything like crypto going away and disappearing. It's here, and it's here because people in the market want something other than just the traditional currencies that we've had. And whether that's right or wrong, it's clearly something that the market wants.
Again, kind of indicating that institutional interest perhaps in crypto. Joining us now is Lou Kerner. He's Blockchain Co-Investors partner and quantum economics head crypto analyst. Lou, you're super bullish on Bitcoin, so I assume you think this is a buying opportunity. But what would you say tactically about the price action and the retail versus the institutional demand and all the rest of it?
Yeah, Kelly, I tend to take a longer-term view of things. I really am looking out 10 years and think that Bitcoin will be at least $1 million in 10 years, and I'm pretty sure that it's going to get there by going up and down and up and down and up and down in very wild swings, because that's what it does. I think we had 6 downswings of about more than 30% in the 2017 bull market. So if you've been in Bitcoin a while, you've seen this again and again and again.
Although I saw your stat about $1 million, Lou, and I was just trying to do some quick math. I mean, you're talking about maybe $25 trillion market cap for Bitcoin if it were ever worth that much. And the whole S&P 500 is only worth like $35 trillion. So basically, the money would have to come out of either the entire S&P 500 or the equivalent size of the whole U.S. economy in order for Bitcoin, and all go into Bitcoin. I mean, is there enough liquidity to support prices anything close to those levels, let alone where we are now?
Well, my guess is the U.S. Treasury is going to print that up in between now and then. So they're creating massive amounts of liquidity. And from a very macro perspective, I'm getting to that $1 million figure. Assume that it's going to get half of the store of value market, which is 10 trillion today, and I think that market's going to grow to 40 trillion over the next 10 years, because it's not that Bitcoin is a little bit better store of value than gold. It's 10x, 100x better. And when you get new things that are that much better, the markets tend to grow dramatically.
Why is it that much better than gold as a store of value? And why, if it is so volatile, is it a store of value at all?
That's a fair question about the volatility. If you look in, to minute by minute, day by day, it's tremendously volatile. If you look at it and you telescope out, over any 2 to 3 year period, nobody's ever lost Bitcoin who's held onto it for more than 3 years. So if you telescope out, it's actually not volatile. It really goes in one direction, and that's up. And I apologize. What was the other question?
No, that was it. I mean, that was basically my question. I suppose another question I have would be for a retail investor, and retail investors are very interested in this. I just got off a phone call with a very educated business school professor who asked me, what about Bitcoin? And I fumbled around with my answer. If I were interested in investing in it, what percentage of my portfolio is a fair and safe amount to put in it if I'm an ordinary mid-career?
Well, the older you are, the more careful you'd want to be. It's a gamble. It's not an investment. It's much more of a gamble.
Individual family person.
Sure. Well, I think that depends on what your risk tolerance is. There's still risk in Bitcoin. I'm not here saying that it's not risk, but it's a massive asymmetric bet. In other words, I think it can go up 25x in the next 10 years, and the most can go down is 1x. So it's the greatest asymmetric bet I've seen in my lifetime.
Is it for money you don't care about losing? Or is it for money that is kind of your flyer money, your mad money, as Jim Cramer might call it?
Well, I think it depends on who you are. I think if you're very risk averse, having 1% in is probably a good amount. And if you're more aggressive, having 10% in, I think would probably be a lot. For people who don't really understand it so much, for people like myself who have very deep conviction about it, I have more than 50% of my wealth tied up. But I'm looking out, long term, and I buy Bitcoin every single day. So from my perspective, when it goes down like it's going down today and has been going down, well, not today, but it went down I think 9 straight days. That just meant for me, I was buying it cheaper and cheaper.
Okay, here's a live stream on the topic.
from the ERC network to the Matic network. But do we have to do exactly that for every other ERC20 coin that we want to swap on there?
Yeah, the ones that they don't have every other. So, like the altcoins are small, maybe keep them and let the dip ride. What's up, man?
Man, I don't know if I misheard you or not, but did you just say we were going to sell all of our crypto?
No, I did not say that.
Oh, okay, man.
I said we're gonna make a decision. That's all I said. That might be one.
Okay, man. All right, man.
It's all good, man. I get it though.
1,000 people are watching this live stream.
It hit like 3,100 or something like that. Hey, where's the record button again? Oh, right here, recording this computer. Oh, let's not do that. Let's stop recording. It's recording. There it is. Okay. Over here, forgetting how to record. It's a really good sign. And if we reject below it, then it's probably smarter to take some money off the table and hedge against risk, and just see if we can buy back in again if you have to. Yeah, it's just risk versus reward. That's it. The risk is much higher now. That's it. Yep.
Hey, Alex, when you made the sell call the other day, you were talking about selling into cash, right? We're new, but we just joined today, so we're just wondering, like, when you're making sell calls, you're selling into cash, right? And then buying up.
Yeah. So what I usually do is I'll either say the specific or I'll refer you to my Xerion. You can clearly see my transaction history. And in that case, yes, I'll sell everybody sell to stablecoins.
So 950 people are watching this stream live. How can it be
Stablecoins
wrong?
or cash?
Same thing. USD.
USDC,
Yeah,
USDC.
Which is like a stablecoin.
Okay, got you. Or USD?
Good question.
That's what's cheap. When is it pumping?
It's not really an altcoin question at this point. It's a Bitcoin, Ethereum, total market capitalization question. She will pump when they pump.
All right, gotcha.
Yes, sir. What's up, Diego? How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, brother. How are you?
Good. Surviving.
So, question: when some of your cryptos are in the red, what strategy do you use in determining whether or not to cut your losses and sell, or hold them until hopefully they go back up?
There's an assortment of different things. It's not just one. I usually weigh pros and cons. I mean, we have a checklist for this that explains to you exactly what we use, but just overall gist is we use technical analysis. We use a lot of like market sentiment and what's going on in the world as an indicator. We use trickle-down economics, on-chain metrics. We look at pretty much everything and see like what's more bullish and bearish, what are the big fundamental reasons. It's a combination of a lot, to be honest with you. It's a combination of a lot.
How do you question is if we say, hey, it's time to de-risk, a lot of us are going to be de-risking and stuff we're already underwater on.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Is, do you sell anyway if you're underwater, or does it let it ride?
Personally, it shouldn't matter if you're underwater. It shouldn't inhibit your decision or in any way, shape, or form. You should never take in consideration if you're in profit or in loss when you make a decision. You should actually isolate those variables. Yeah, so even if you're at a loss, right, at least in the short term, especially in times like this, where it's really important to sell the top, because it could be the top, and it's the probably most likely time it's ever been the top, it's really good to isolate what profit or loss you are in when making a decision. Like, you should not take that into consideration, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you're profit or loss. If the market wants to top, it does not matter if you're in profit or loss. It's going to top. You understand what I'm saying? That is not.
If you're calling it top and then into a bear as a scenario, sure, that makes total sense. Yeah. If we're not calling top and into a bear, then we're saying it's going to recover.
I mean, that doesn't make sense to me. So, for example, if you're down $10,000 from your initial investment and you sell, then the upside needs to be greater for selling than for holding, correct?
Not always. It just needs to be a right decision. The only thing we're trying to do is come to a right decision. That's it.
I think what Alex is kind of getting into is like, if you can go up to like say 10K BTC and you're still down 40K or whatever, and then you go down to 5K, when you sold it at 10K, you accumulated more at 5K, but you're down.
Exactly. Because it can go either way, no matter what your bag is. The whole point is just to make the right decision. So it's actually kind of smart when you separate emotions of your own portfolio from the decision. You should just make a rational decision, right?
Wouldn't the smart decision to be selling half and keep out?
It's not always smart. I mean, that's usually what I do. I sell percentages. Like this recent sell call, I didn't sell all of it. I sold 25%. So yeah, that's like that. It depends on what your risk tolerance is, how much conviction you have in the call, right? It's always how much conviction you have in the call. That's all it is. It's not how much conviction Alex has in the call. It's how much you feel it should be dropping or not, right?
So when you suggest us to sell, how do we include the criteria you mentioned when you tell us that? Are you suggesting that we sell regardless of our position, whether or not we're in the red or in the black?
I would say you should look at the fundamental variables that we use to analyze the market to make your decision.
Okay.
That's it. You just have to make the decision based on what you think the market's going to do. So if I make a sell call, then whatever. Okay, so it's not calls. They're just what I do. I'm giving you guys what I do. That's it, right? So if I am a person that's been in crypto for a long time and I'm selling Ethereum and I clearly put it and I put Xerion, you guys see the amount I'm selling, right? Then that you can see the intensity. You can literally see, okay, Alex is selling. Let's figure out why he's selling and make your own decision based off, use mine to catalyze your research, whatever the case is. Again, like I said, you guys literally clearly heard me say that on Sunday. All the coaches came to a conclusion that we were going to continue to go higher. We all said we're going higher, and we stayed over that Sunday night. And my gut told me to sell. So how am I going to sit here and tell you guys why I'm going to sell? Think about that. Just think about that, right? How am I going to tell you guys the reasons why I sold when we all came to a conclusion that we probably shouldn't sell? You understand what I'm saying? Doesn't make sense. I'm just telling you guys what I'm doing with my portfolio. That's it, right? I'm not perfect. I've just been in this market for a while, and sometimes gut feeling is a real thing. Ask any trader. There's always an element of gut feeling.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Good questions, though. I get it. You guys are learning. What's up, William?
I mean, I just had a couple things too. I think like people are trying to think too hard on a lot of this stuff. Like making bigger bags is a thing, even if you're in the red. And I think also DCAing out is just the same as DCAing in. So if you feel that your coins potentially go up or go down, you can always take part of that bag out and then hold it for a new position. And then if it doesn't make that position, you don't have to go back into that same position. You can go into a different coin that's low, so you can pick up more coin, right? It's just percentages at the end of the day. It's not really a factor of okay, I need to get back into E specifically. If you just reallocate that money, if your coin that you had went up instead of going down, and you move it.
Exactly. The decision should be the decision. Go ahead.
What do you think is a good way to DCA out? Like 20%, 30%, 10%?
That I did 25% because I think it's a good solid like 1/4 of my portfolio. But that all depends on specifically.
So Margarita, who I had on this show a couple of weeks ago, she just tweeted, "I've come to find this heuristic, which works pretty much everywhere." And Elliot Blatt's going to love this heuristic. So heuristic is a learning method that is not perfect, but is good enough. So for example, if you're walking down the street and then you see everybody like running past you in a panic, it'd be probably a pretty good decision to just join them and run with them, because in all likelihood, 25 people running past you in a panic, they probably know something that you don't know. And if they're wrong, there's not a big downside. So Margarita tweets, "All that is natural is not only good, but superior to everything that is unnatural." Elliot Blatt's going to love that. All right. Here's a news article today. Washington is rushing to regulate crypto. It is a mess because you have so many different government agencies that want a piece of crypto oversight. And the confusion has the crypto industry calling for clearer regulations. So we're talking about the IRS, the SEC, FinCEN, the CFTC. The wild swings in crypto prices this year have enthralled and disheartened investors, alarmed Wall Street, focused the attention of regulators and lawmakers who already had a cryptocurrency in their sights. With shares of Coinbase, the prize of Silicon Valley investors who placed early bets on cryptocurrency markets, swinging along with the price of Bitcoin. Tech is worried too. So what business primarily wants is clarity with regard to government regulation. The soundness and stability of cryptocurrencies has gone from a fascination of early enthusiastic adopters to a mainstream concern. One particular worry is the ability of vague tweets from a single person, such as Tesla CEO Elon Musk, who has mixed his personal ardor for cryptocurrencies with the electric vehicle company's business to send crypto prices gyrating. Washington once seemed befuddled by cryptocurrency handing out confusing rulings, but the SEC is now chaired by Gary Gensler, who taught a course on blockchain at MIT. He made it clear at a recent House committee hearing that the crypto industry could come under greater regulation. If one trades Bitcoin in America today, there's not an investor protection regime. The early crypto scene was dominated by libertarian types seeking to evade or defeat regulation. Now, a substantial number of players in the crypto industry have been seeking more regulatory clarity. There are a number of areas where the industry interacts with regulators, from banking to securities to taxes. So one big question is, who is responsible for regulating crypto exchanges? So government regulators quite concerned about manipulation by people like Elon Musk. How do you regulate crypto exchanges? Currently, crypto exchanges have no overarching regulation as equity markets do. Coinbase is registered in most states with a money transmitter license, but not as an exchange. So there's just various patchwork frameworks designed to keep customers' money secure and guard against money laundering, but they will not prevent price manipulation. So let's get back here to the great Bitcoin debate.
I can prove to you on blockchain exactly how many Bitcoin there are. I can prove to you and show you exactly how many Bitcoin are in circulation. And I can prove to you and show you every single transaction that has occurred since January 3rd, 2009. Mike cannot do that for gold, and he cannot do that for dollars. And so the whole argument of 95% of transactions are illegitimate or fake, he's talking about the exchange traded volume. What he is not talking about is the actual transactions on the blockchain, because you can prove it. And that is the divergence of our worldviews, right? Many of the issues, I believe, in the legacy financial world, in the macro system, Mike and I probably actually agree on. And I actually think we agree on many of the solutions, from the sense of he holds gold and I hold Bitcoin. Those two things are very similar. They're both sound money principled assets. He chooses the analog version or the analog application of those sound money principles. I choose the digital application of those sound money principles. And so I think that what we end up seeing here, and the kind of great equalizer in this conversation, is that the world that is outside of this new digital decentralized world is a narrative-based world. Mike will throw a lot of data at the wall. Mike will tell a lot of stories, but he cannot prove the transactions. How much money is laundered in the legacy system? There's estimates that over $2 trillion is laundered. The global money supply would put that at a higher percentage than what is estimated to be the illicit transactions in the Bitcoin system. The difference is I can prove, I can show every single transaction. He can't do that for dollars. And so